Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing in our Cloud Service Business Unit. And today I'm joined by Joerg and Brandon. Joerg, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Joerg Law. I'm a Technical Product Manager in VMware's Cloud Services Business Unit.
And Brandon?
Yeah, I'm Brian Noeldner. I'm a Solutions Architect on the VMware Learning Platform team.
Thank you, and welcome today. VMware Learning Platform is a really core initiative for us in terms of getting our service providers skilled up and giving them access to more enablement. So we're going to run through today some of the aspects of the VMware Learning Platform, what's available on it, how partners access it. But let's start at the top. What is the VMware Learning Platform?
Yeah, so VLP, as we kind of refer to it internally here, is a SaaS platform that VMware's been developing now for over 8 years, and it's a tool that we used internally for a very long time to really meet a lot of the use cases that VMware had itself, right, around being able to launch and deliver multiple repeatable labs for our large-scale events at VMworld, things like that. And there just really wasn't a product set that offered the capabilities that we were looking for and the consistent reliability and scalability that we were looking for being able to drive not just our events, our large-scale events at VMworld, but being able to do things like, if you're familiar with our hands-on labs, being able to showcase our latest and greatest software releases for our customers kind of globally. And then also driving into providing better educational experiences for our EDU classes and for being able to do sales demos and stuff like that. So we really have been leveraging it as a tool internally at VMware for a very long time to target a lot of different kind of unique use cases. And like I said, there just wasn't anything in the marketplace that captured all of the requirements that we were looking for. And obviously we have a fairly robust stack of technologies that we could pull from. And so we leveraged really our entire product set to build the platform that we were using. And then VLP is kind of a layer on top that's being able to tie into each of those pieces and deliver on the value that we were delivering. So people probably aren't aware, but if you've ever taken a hands-on lab or taken one of our training courses or anything like that, chances are very good that you've already used VLP yourself in one way or another, right? So that experience that you're getting where you have a console-based lab, an integrated manual, and you're walking through different steps, kind of learning through different scenarios and modules, that is effectively VLP, or the end user side of VLP. And what drives that is all of our director product sets, NSX and things like that, for being able to deliver those containerized, isolated lab environments. They don't have to be isolated, but basically we're leveraging the cloud engine to be able to deliver those experiences over and over again.
So you're delivering basically mostly isolated, perhaps shared cloud environments for provisioning different types of workloads, whether it be a hands-on lab or something else. And
exactly.
All right, so that's really interesting to know. So this is basically, when we think about all of these other things like the VMware education route, the hands-on labs, the VMworld stuff, which is huge, and I know you guys drive thousands and thousands of demos and labs in those events.
Yeah, so VLP is kind of the interface layer. We're leveraging that for doing the permission-based access, the entitlement of that session and access to the Cloud VApp that we're provisioning on demand, and then also the interface layer, right? So the catalog that you can do self-selection of labs, the actual delivery of the lab, the end user interface, the integrated manual. That's what VLP is. It's that top layer that's providing a really good, consistent, user-friendly experience to the end users, and then we're utilizing all the APIs on the back end, the cloud infrastructure for provisioning, deprovisioning those VApps on demand.
Cloud infrastructure, that means, organization VDC within Cloud Director.
Precisely, yep. And that's how the SaaS service is run, actually. So we're leveraging, obviously, Cloud Director on the back end, we've got several different orgs, and each what we call a tenant, so each customer organization is its own org or multiple orgs, obviously, that are presented, and that's how we're providing, redundancy, multi-region support, things like that. So basically, that's how we get our scale, right? Is being able to have providers all over the place that have cloud capacity that we can leverage and basically tie into.
And I guess you're using things like vApps within Cloud Director to replicate consistent environments. Exactly.
Yeah. So each lab is a vApp. So we're leveraging, a vApp template, and that's really what a lab is, and it's the perfect construct for a lab, because you can have multiple VMs inside of it, whatever type of network configuration you need, and it can be consistent and it can be identical, more importantly, right? So we can have a completely identical down to the MAC address virtual environment that's just stamped out over and over and over again, 100% consistent. It removes all of the complications that traditional lab environments have that you see on customer sites where they're trying to do some kind of a virtual lab environment, and they're having to run really complex recipes because they have to re-IP everything, make sure there's no conflicts, making sure they can have 4, 5, 20 instances of this environment running at the same time, completely unaware of each other, but still have network connectivity. This just solves it all for us. It's really the perfect solution.
Something I can say from my past experience. I used to deliver a lot of trainings, obviously, for different topics on vSphere and VMware products. And as a trainer, that just having such a tool available is very efficient in the way allows you to very efficiently deliver the training, because you don't have to hassle around which student gets assigned to which set of IP addresses and if they configure something and sort of accidentally hit the IP address of somebody else, then you get group interaction and a lot of time wasted in troubleshooting, which does not help people really to learn the actual content of the training. But using VLP, it is ensured that each student will literally get the same identical lab environment, and that really helps to, first of all, it makes the development of lab guides much easier, because you always can assume exactly what's there, and then during a training delivery, it's just a much less error-prone way to deliver user experience for the students.
I think one of the just curious to understand your journey with VLP and using VMware Cloud Director and NSX. How's that kind of grown, Brandon? Because obviously Cloud Director's changed quite considerably. Has that been to your advantage? Is there kind of new services that you've been able to roll out with VLP and Cloud Director underpinning it?
So it was always based around Cloud Director as the core engine that we're using for delivery. And we've worked really close with the team, really helping to drive some scale points in the product itself, because we probably run some of the larger events and drive some of the capabilities specifically around console proxy and things like that, because that's the main vector that we use for providing access to these virtual environments. And a normal service provider just doesn't have the requirements that we would have, where we would have thousands of people connected in through the console proxy at the same time, right? So it's been really interesting to find where there were limitations, where we needed to drive scale and capability, and it's helped drive some of the capabilities within the product itself. And then also, obviously, we're leveraging it for its capabilities around link clone provisioning and things like that, right? Because it helps us in quite a bit in being able to provision, both in saving resources on the backend storage perspective, but then also just provisioning very, very quickly, being able to use the suspend features and stuff like that for quick resume of labs. There's a lot of capabilities that we're really leaning on within VCD to provide a really good experience for the end users.
A pretty good validation on the other side from the VCD engineering and product management team as well, because we know that VCD as a platform is stable enough to run these huge amount of workloads. When you imagine like 20,000 people doing hands-on labs during a VMworld event. That is a lot of churn in VMs and a lot of API calls and tasks, and we can make sure that the VCD platform really is able to provide this scalability.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you put it like that, Joerg, it's quite amazing actually. You're spinning up all of these perhaps isolated VApps. You're then proxy consoling to them. You're setting all that up. Then obviously you've got a life cycle with that VApp, as you might pause it, resume it. You might destroy it in 10 hours or whatever it might be. And VLP is kind of orchestrating all of that into Cloud Director, the backend, and calling the APIs. It's a real testament to the power of Cloud Director for sure.
Yeah, and that's also where the smart features of VLP come into. VCD provides actions like suspending VApps and provisioning them in a linked clone fashion in a very fast way. But the learning platform, and I think we will likely discuss this later, provides you with all the logic around that, so that you as a training administrator don't have to care about when do I have to provision the VApps, how many do I have to sort of pre-provision for people coming in, and that's really where learning platform takes a lot of workload from you to design these or manage these VApps.
Yeah, and I guess that's where we're going to go next, right? Which is, Brandon, we're on this conversation talking about VLP and what VLP has done for us with VMworlds and hands-on labs, and basically orchestrating a lot of the infrastructure underneath a lot of the learning capacities we have and demo capacities we have. What's new in VLP now, and what is Joerg talking about here with the training platform?
Yeah, well, let me, if you don't mind, I can share my screen and walk you through kind of what the user interface looks like, what that experience is, and then I'll show you what that looks like on the back end and how we kind of make it all happen. Okay, so this is what we would call the end user portal for a learning platform, and this probably looks somewhat familiar because this is going to be the experience that you see if you go to Hands-on Lab HOL. And really, this portal can be completely customized. We make this to the point where you can load your own custom CSS and stuff like that for being able to really brand the portal to be specific to your own marketing and branding. So it's essentially a white label service that, as a customer, you provide, and you can provide access to your end users, students or customers or whatever, and treat it as your own product.
So before we go down this too far, Brendan, let's just identify what we're talking about here. This is a new offering as a SaaS service. So previously, where VLP was ours and we're assuming it to deliver our education enablement, now what we're looking at is the fact that VLP has now been SaaSified and, like you say, available for branding and skinning. And that is now available as a SaaS service to anyone who wants to create learning environments. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and really what this came from, like I said, VMware has been using it themselves, and we had several customers come to us saying, hey, this is a fantastic experience. I have my own content that I want to deliver to my students or end users. Can I buy this, right? And so here, going on almost 2 years at this point, we finally kind of released it as a commercial offering. And like you said, it's a SaaS service. The wrapper, the front end that you're seeing here is hosted by VMware. We manage it. It's constantly being updated like any other SaaS service. And there's a couple of different options for how you can consume it that we can cover later. But high level, you can have a cloud provider that you're leveraging through the managed services side, or VMware has cloud instances, obviously, that we run ourselves that you can consume on demand as well. So we have a lot of flexibility in the consumption, but it's at the end of the day, it's either a hybrid because you're bringing your own cloud, or something that VMware is running and managing that's on its own.
Okay, so if it is a, just want to be clear about this. So it is a SaaS service, but as a service provider, if I wanted to use the SaaS service to orchestrate infrastructure in my labs, that could be done. You could reach in as an endpoint and provision into that environment.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So because we leverage all of the constructs of vCloud Director, if you're a service provider, you could sell capacity to your end users, and basically become an availability zone within VLP, right? Where a tenant has capacity with you that you're selling to them, and we're kind of the application that you're running on top of that capacity.
Interesting.
And it just shows up as available capacity to VLP.
Yeah, this opens up some nice opportunities for service providers, not only to use this for their own customers if they wanted to do some customer enablement, customer training in the services they offer, but also to be like a broker and have them running the VLP SaaS platform for an education provider who is then consuming VLP from VMware via the service provider and orchestrating into the service provider's infrastructure. So they're selling the infrastructure and selling the VLP access and configuration.
Exactly. It's an application stack that can drive a considerable amount of consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine. I think about the 20,000 labs at VMware, that's quite a significant amount of consumption.
Right. Yeah, so here, just real quick, I can show you, we've got in this interface, a listing, or what we call catalogs, how you can have logical groupings of all the labs. This would be a scenario where you have kind of on-demand lab registration and access. So as a user, I can log in, I would walk through, take a look at the available labs, and then self-register, right? So you can go through and enroll. This tells you how long you have to take the lab, how long is allotted, and here's where you can have some of the policies around the labs that you develop for how long your end users would have access to the lab, how long they can be inside of the lab, which are two different parameters, and if I can come back to it, that's where you can have, is exit allowed or is ending allowed, things like that. So you can have scenarios where you have labs that are sitting out there for weeks at a time, right? And I just come back to the same virtual environment over and over again. We see that in scenarios where you have, more traditional student learning, like a virtual classroom based and things like that. And that's one of the things that we've kind of built on. So this started off, as you can imagine, with what you're seeing here. You have virtual environments that you spin up. They're kind of ephemeral, and when I'm done with it, it just deletes the environment and cleans up the VApp, so that there's a capacity for the next user to go in and utilize the environment. But as we've been developing features and capabilities around more traditional education, we have what I'll show you, more traditional instructor-led training capabilities, a virtual classroom where you can have an instructor interact with students. We have integration with the Zoom and things like that, so that you can actually have more traditional classroom-based learning experiences as well. Now in the interface here, like I had mentioned, this is all just basically remote console into the environment. The benefits that you have with that is that it doesn't require clients or anything to be installed into the virtual environment. You don't need network connectivity of any kind into the bubble, as you would call it. And this provides the ability to have truly 100% isolated environments if you want, but also gives the ability to provide access to multiple different consoles at the same time, versus having to use like a RDP session as a jump box and things like that. So we feel like it gives a really good user experience, and gives us kind of the most flexibility around being able to interact with the VApps that we're provisioning. Let's log in here. So these environments, when they're spun up, they basically are captured in whatever state that you want them to be in prior to turning it into a VApp template. And then basically you can just provision them up at that point over and over again. We've got the interface set up with an integrated manual that would walk you through whatever steps you want to have your end users walk through. And this is customizable as well. So if you have multiple devices, we can actually have the interface pop out the manual into a secondary device, either just using the link or the QR code here. That way they can really take advantage of, if they have just a single screen or something like that, being able to leverage this. And this is all resizable. It's really the same exact capabilities you see today within Cloud Director, around having the remote MKS console and stuff like that. It resizes and everything. All of the things you'd expect, right?
So this is, I'm just trying to think, if you were to run training into, I don't know, public cloud like Azure or AWS and try and do a similar sort of thing, you'll be using kind of resource groups, which are blank templates, if you like. You'd be having to do a lot of work to configure that environment. Whereas here, I think the big advantage of the VApps is it's already pre-configured, pre-built, and you're literally just snapshotting it, if you like, taking a clone of it and starting it up.
Yeah, we're not having to depend on any kind of a blueprint to build out an environment. It's already built, and that makes approaching and thinking about how a lab is configured a lot easier, right? There's a little bit of work up front where you have to go through the act of configuring it, but then you only do it once, and at that point you capture it as a template, and you never have to really configure it again unless you're doing just regular updates, right? It's not trying to manage building a recipe, what is the build order, and things like that.
Yeah, it's really I mean, VApps are a feature we don't really shout about that much, and we should shout about them a lot more. I mean, in this scenario, in development scenarios, in lots of different production scenarios, they're very, very useful things. And to have just the VMs, and I guess it would work with container infrastructures as well in a VApp, within a VM in any case. I'm not sure about Tanzu, Joerg, maybe you know more about that than I do, but there would be, there's all the networking and security component with it as well. So you're getting that in complete environment, which is a big differentiator, I think.
Yeah, and these environments, they can get rather complex or be as simple as a single VM. Like if you focus on something like, I don't know, learn about Word or any other custom application and as an independent software vendor, then it could be a single virtual machine where you just have that application installed. But as you see with all the VMware hands-on labs, it can get as complex as you want and really mimic a complete data center or even complete multiple data center. If you take some of the, I don't know, site recovery manager labs, where we have within that VApp multiple nested ESX hosts, and they really sort of try to simulate 2 different data centers. So you can get as complex as you want with the VApp template functionality.
Exactly, and that's where VMware obviously is pushing the envelope the most as far as what can be included in a virtual lab. As you said, we're doing nested virtualization with multi-site labs and things like that, and that can all be contained within a single VApp with virtual routers and all of that stuff to do stretch clusters. And it's we can really try to replicate as closely as possible a production scenario, which in a lot of traditional lab environments is very hard to replicate, right?
Yeah, I mean, nesting makes a huge difference when you're trying to do all that sort of stuff. Having another layer to go through, that's or to utilize, is really, I think, another key differentiator where you can extend the use case quite considerably.
Right.
Okay, so this is within the console.
Yeah, just the only other thing I wanted to point out here while I was here is we do have multi-language support as well. As you can imagine, that's important because we're delivering labs globally through hands-on labs. So it's kind of one of the requirements that we had, and people can take advantage of that, right? We have, I think it's 12 or 13 languages that we're supporting now. Through the main interface, all the manuals can be multi-language as well. So we do support being able to have kind of a friendly experience globally. So what I'm going to do now is jump over to the administrator dashboard. And this is really the front end that we use for admins to manage the template deployment and really managing the status of their cloud capacity and things like that. On the main dashboard here, this is all customizable with the different widgets that you feel are important to you as an admin for being able to manage and monitor your environment. And here's where you can kind of see the linking back to, terminology from vCloud Director and things like that. In my demo environment, I've got several different clouds available to me to provision into for multiple different regions. And this is where you can see, as a service provider, you could have really a lot of scale for a single individual tenant. So these are all org VDCs that are dedicated to me for being able to provision labs into and be able to replicate across as well. And that's really where we kind of start from a usage perspective. We made a friendly interface for being able to build and manage your lab environments right within VLP. One of the things that we found with a lot of our customers is that they love the flexibility and the power of vCloud Director, but they're often confused because we use a lot of unique terms to VCD that a normal, VMware admin that's familiar with vCenter, they're not used to, right? So being able to build out lab environments and wire them up on the network was sometimes a bit burdensome, right? Because they just didn't understand what all the terminology was and how everything worked. And it was a completely different interface and things like that. So we built Lab Builder for users that really weren't familiar with vCloud Director to be able to provide the capabilities that they needed, but while still being able to leverage all of the capabilities of VCD on the back end and being able to take advantage of all of the goodness that it has without kind of scaring away users. So you can see here it's all a VApp, right? These are VApp templates that you can see right here, and we do have the ability to import from a customer's existing environment. So if they have virtual environments that they've already built out, rather than make them go through the effort of building them again from scratch within our environment, we can just ingest anything that they've already built out, as long as it's a VMware-friendly container format, right?
Sure.
And then once it's imported, it just shows up as an available template within the environment, and they can build it out here. I'll just jump into the editor, and you can see what I'm talking about. So within here, this is really the console that you can use for building out the environments. All of the things that you would kind of expect in being able to modify and adjust are available through here. You can add whatever VMs that you need to from your catalogs into the virtual VApp that you're building out. Obviously, the networking is set up in such a way that you can go through and configure it just like you would expect within vCloud Director, including the services and stuff like that, and even modifying the start stop order and things to that effect. So you can really customize this however you need to prior to going through what we call publish, and that's really converting that living VApp environment into a template. And we did add some additional capabilities that you wouldn't see in vCloud Director. One of the areas that we've seen it specifically with like our enterprise customers, where they don't have the ability to share files through kind of a traditional means, exposing it to the internet. A lot of customers just have like Dropbox or something like that, OneDrive, where they can just have something downloadable on the internet. But some of our more security conscious customers and enterprise customers just have no way of exposing internal files to an external SaaS service. So we just have the ability to just upload files here. This will allow you to get access, transfer your file if you want to install applications or whatever, and get them right into your VApp environment that you're building out. So we have added some additional layers of user friendliness into the experience to try to make it as easy as possible.
Some of those screens there were looking very, very much like Cloud Director screens, like the networking screens? Is actually that being pulled from Cloud Director, or is that something that you're building yourselves?
Nope. This is all VLP. We actually are leveraging a lot of the same frameworks because we know the developers.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is all unique to VLP.
Excellent. Okay. And just when we're looking at so you got the VApps, you got the content, you got the labs. How much monitoring is built into this? So how could obviously a provider could charge if they were selling this as a service on capacity consumed? That'd be one way of looking at it. But if you wanted to charge on per lab or per VApp spun up, is there reporting and metering on that?
So we don't have metering to that granularity. I mean, we capture what we call an entitlement, and that's going to be tracked through a user entitlement is essentially the access token for being able to get access to a cloud VApp, and it's that mapping between a user and the cloud VApp, and we do track all of that. But that's as far as we go. We only go down to the VApp level. And that's where some of the things, so in a traditional VCD environment, right, when you have provided access to a user, that's still something that can be kind of managed and edited, right? You can add VMs and you can delete VMs and things like that. Because of the experience that we're delivering, you want to think of a lab environment as more static, right? You're not being able to modify that environment after it's been provisioned. The only modifications are happening during the editing of that lab experience. Once it's turned into a template and it's being provisioned for your end users, it's effectively a static environment. They can change the content within the virtual environment, but they can't add resources or anything like that.
No, it's more of a kind of, you might sell this on per lab execution, for example, and just being able to monitor.
That is how we are metering for like what I was talking about before, the hybrid deployment model. The way that it's licensed is a concurrent user license, essentially. So we track the number of concurrent lab sessions.
Okay.
Yep. So we do have a lot of policies around how the lab can be accessed and experienced, and that's where we have what I was talking about earlier, the valid period and the time allotted. And this is where you can set policies around how long the lab is available for. And this is really where the automation comes in from a VLP perspective for being able to clean up the environments after the fact. You don't have kind of VApp sprawl like you would have in a traditional environment where things are provisioned and just never cleaned up outside of the policies that you have in place. And this is also where you would have, which manuals are attached to which VApps. And we do also have what we call a deployment pool. And this is also kind of unique to VLP. It's not a feature that's in vCloud Director. And this is where you can have policies in place for pre-provisioning virtual environments. And why would you want to do that? Well, that provides a better user experience. So I can have a policy in place where I can ensure I always have 1 or 2 or 5 of these labs pre-provisioned and kind of turned on and ready to be connected to. That way, when I have an end user log into an environment, they're not waiting 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever time it takes to actually provision that virtual environment before they can connect. They can just connect immediately and they're off to be able to start using the virtual environment. And we can have that constantly refill. So, if you start to run out of the deployment pool capacity or available resources, it'll just refill with more additional virtual labs. This was obviously something that we had to develop for our larger events, right? Because you can imagine at VMworld, when the sessions break and everybody wants to go take a lab, you've got 50 to 200 people trying to launch a lab at the same time, especially some of the more popular labs. That could completely crush your infrastructure if you weren't prepared. So we can actually pre-deploy those environments. People can connect to them, and the infrastructure just keeps running.
That's a very neat little feature.
Yeah. We do also have the ability to, like I said, manage the power operations as well. And this really comes down to, managing resources and things like that, because you don't want your labs running 24/7 if they're, out there running for weeks at a time. At least not usually. In most training scenarios, you kind of expect those resources to be suspended or shut down in the evening when your students aren't using the environments. And this is where you can manage that, where based on idle times and things like that, we would go through and suspend or shut down those VApps while they're not being used.
Very cool.
So that's kind of the lab construct, which you're kind of familiar with. Now, the next step is really building on that and being able to offer a class. And this is where you would have a more traditional instructor-led training experience, where it's not just on demand. Somebody comes in and takes a lab based on what they think looks good, but they're actually registering for that in advance. And a class is more, as you can imagine, time-bound in a traditional learning experience. And here you would have a roster of students that are pre-registered, and they would log in. And then as part of that, you're going to have an instructor that can actually interact with the students. I think, are any of these still running? Oh. Let me just clone this, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here, I'm just going to make myself the instructor. Fun with sudo, you just choose the lab that you want as that, and then you choose when this lab is going to be running. So here, just put it in the future, and then you select when it's going to be running, the time that it'd be running during the day. You have your roster of students that you can specify in advance, and then here we can even select if it's going to have integration with Zoom or something like that. And we have some advanced resource management as well, so you can ensure that your lab is starting up in advance or not, and things like that. So here I'll just have it provision all the resources that I need, and then it gives you kind of an estimate on the amount of resources you're going to be using. In a compute unit is what we refer to that, which is effectively 1 gig of RAM and half of these virtual CPU, and then storage is in gigabytes of capacity as well. And
how's that price calculated there?
Yeah, so that's based off of our on-demand pricing as an estimate, and our on-demand pricing is just based off of the compute units on an hourly basis, essentially. So.
Could a service provider put their own charges in there or modify that in any way?
No, that's based off of our just regular rate billing for what VMware is hosting. For a service provider, it would be more aligned to the model of having a concurrent user, because we wouldn't be metering the usage because it's not our capacity anymore.
Oh yeah, of course. So, yeah. Okay.
Just log in here. Okay, so here you can see this is what we call the instructor interface, and I'm just going to drop back over to my student view here quick, and you can see I've been registered for a class. I'm going to start this. While that's provisioning, you can see as a student, you can see the status of the student currently, and once my session is actually logged in, you'll be able to, as an instructor, be able to kind of over the shoulder shadow their session and take a look at what they're currently viewing within their labs. And then there's some interactivity as well outside of the Zoom integration that we have, where as a student I could say, hey, I need some assistance, and it shows up as one of your users needs some help. You can go through and open their console, Or conversely, if you have instruction that's going on, you can actually blank their screens so they can't kind of go ahead in the lab and take advantage of the manual that's integrated. They're kind of forced to pay attention to you at least as much as possible before you re-enable their screen.
I love that feature.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see, it's still starting up. And then, so if you have several different students, obviously this is going to be a tiled view that kind of gives them an overview of everybody that's in the class. It gives you a status of their manual step that they're in, so you can see how far they've gone in the manual, and then the percentage is going to be how long they've been in that classroom environment. So it kind of builds off of what you were seeing previously, but adds some additional layers of functionality that you can imagine is pretty powerful for the education space. And the one other thing that I should add to this is outside of all of the kind of traditional interaction that you've seen here, VLP is completely LTI compliant, and what that means is it's a standard in the learning management tools space, learning tools interoperability. So if you have a learning management system, a lot of common ones are like Moodle or Blackboard or something like that, where you have learning paths and things to that effect. You can integrate VLP directly with those tools as a resource. So you can imagine a scenario where you'd have your training plan, whatever education with traditional videos and PowerPoints and things like that, test questions or whatever. But as part at the end of that learning path, you could actually have a more interactive training experience where they launch that lab, and the lab resource can be launched directly from the LMS using the LTI integration, which is kind of like a API Lite essentially. And it would drop them directly into the lab where they could go through and go through the things that they had just learned in a more interactive experience.
So Brendan, let me ask, do you have sorry, go on, Joerg.
Yeah, that's very powerful, because I think that not only helps, of course, with using VLP as a platform for like instructor-led training in smaller groups when you are within the same room, like classroom training. But if you have some larger scale and remote experience, then first of all, that way to look over the shoulder of your 20 or even 50 or 100 students helps a lot. And with the integration into Moodle and the other learning management systems, it also helps just to scale the ability for providing labs in a much easier way than if you don't have VLP. So if you have a class or a small regular training of like 12 people, it is somewhat okay if you manually try to provide some lab environments for them. But if you think about, I don't know, a university or even some newer cohort-based training or online-based training where you have pretty much open enrollment and like 200 students, that would be impossible to provide some lab environments.
Yeah, it really reduces the burden on the instructors for having to kind of pre-stage those environments and make sure everything is ready before class and stuff like that. It removes a lot of that from a requirement perspective. On top of that, it produces the ability to start delivering things virtually, which is something that, as you can imagine, a lot of our customers have come to us looking for answers, because they can't. Traditionally, they were flying people into their lab environments and having a group of 15 or 20 people or whatever go through traditional training, and that just kind of went away, right? You can't do that anymore, or at least you haven't been able to. And VLP offered a really good use case for being able to solve that problem very quickly, right? So we had a lot of customers that were doing this in a more traditional fashion, and they needed an answer right away. And there was no time involved in kind of transitioning to this platform, because they could use their existing labs. They could just upload them and start sending out links to their end users when they register, and suddenly they could deliver their class training remotely in a very consistent manner with what they were doing historically, but suddenly introducing scale. I've got a lot of examples where customers had trainers that were literally flying all over the country doing this in kind of regional areas, and their productivity, they traveled on Mondays and Fridays. They were only available for training 3 days out of the week. And suddenly their trainers could scale considerably more because they weren't spending half of their week in travel. And really their home life experience dramatically increased as well.
Better all around.
Exactly. Yep. But yeah, and like I said, this is kind of going into the back end. From a cloud perspective, this is all driven off of being able to deliver directly into your org VDCs that you provision up to VLP. So in the case of a MSP, essentially this would just be another cloud that we're adding. It's as simple as having that service account that you're able to connect into with the org VDC that you've provisioned for your customer. And then it's resources that we can consume or provision into. In the lab manager itself, let me go back to lab builder. You can see here where you can specify replicas. We make it very easy to replicate across catalogs for multiple different sites. So you can have that content replicated all over the place, and then it's just available as a region that you can deploy into, including having labs that are available in multiple regions that we just kind of load balance across. And those org VDCs can be in the same region. It can be distributed across geographic areas. It doesn't really matter how that architecture is set up, but we really are able to use a lot of the backend capabilities of vCloud Director. You can see here we've got the ability to do shadows and things like that for those replicas across multiple different orgs, etc.
That's very cool. Sorry, can you just go back to the region setup where you viewed all the clouds? Right. So this would be here. I could point this back into. Are you talking about doing like a multi-site association here with VCD, or are we talking about just using?
These are individual org VDCs that you have made available to you. So in this case, these are different regions that VMware is running. This one is a coworker of mine. He's actually got a home lab that he set up, and it's just available capacity that he can use as well for demo purposes. But basically, these are going to be org VDCs that are provisioned with capacity that I can consume.
And yeah, I'm wondering about the connectivity to them. So this will be SSL, VPN type connectivity between these sites. Right.
Yeah. So we're just using the regular. So the way that the architecture is set up is you've got your front end cell server. We're using obviously SSL to connect and do the API commands too, and then all of the this is effectively command and control. We're managing the director instance that's at that location. That location is going to have a template available within one of its catalogs, and we provision. So we can copy content in or out and delete and manage it essentially, but it's an island that we can control effectively. Right.
And it's contained within that org VDC unit that they expose and provide access to.
Yeah, and it's kind of to give some reference here, you can see all of my different org VDCs that I have connections to, and each of them have different listings. That one's empty of templates. Right. So
yeah, got it. Okay, so that's a little bit of a setup from the MSP side, just to set up the org VDC, set up the catalogs and the consumption metrics for that org VDC, and then just connect through from here. And
yeah, it's a really basic org setup. We need obviously a catalog, which is a requirement, and then you would have your what we call cloud networks in here, but these are just your org networks that are going to be providing connectivity into those environments. Kind of the default VApp that we build out or we leverage. We have a VApp router as part of that construct, and then all of the VMs within that lab sit behind that. Obviously, you can adjust that architecture however you need to, but just a vanilla VApp that we create from scratch is going to contain your VApp router that has a network connectivity out to the org network, and on the inside we're just running DHCP and standard NATed interfaces, right?
And Brendan, last question for me: would this support NSXT environments at target end, or does it matter?
Yes, we do support NSXT now, because obviously that's what's going to be the primary usage going forward. So in that case, we're basically leveraging a VApp router, or not a VApp router, but a VM as a router in as part of that VApp, because we lose the VApp router capability from NSXV. Okay.
Right, yeah, got it. Okay, because I was going to say 10.3 VCD just has started supporting NSXT via VApp network services, but obviously you need the network router, like you said. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is awesome. Any final thoughts on this, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if anybody that's watching has any questions, they can obviously. Let me just go to the product site. Learn what you want. You can reach out to us from here if you have any questions, and happy to speak to you about it. I think that there's a lot of really great opportunity for our service provider partner network for being able to utilize this as an application and drive consumption. It helps us in greatly expanding the regions that we could possibly support. There's definitely areas within the world that we don't have as good of coverage from a region perspective, where VMware has capacity, but partners obviously solve that problem for us. And we think that it's a fantastic application that customers are really interested in being able to deliver. Everybody's looking at training capabilities, and I know that we focused on training quite a bit here, but all of the different ways that VMware is using it for training, for demos, for cybersecurity training, things like that. VLP really helps a lot in being able to deliver those experiences. So
definitely. So this webpage, learningplatform.vmware.com, this has got, does it have pricing on here? And
there isn't pricing. Okay. There isn't any pricing located on here, but we can definitely walk through, because it kind of depends on how it's being consumed, what the pricing is. But we can walk through the scenarios, set up a quick call. It's very, very easy. In fact, on here you can even literally schedule a call with me through our little chat bot. It'll give you a time on my calendar, and you can set up a call with me, and we can go through your scenario and talk pricing and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of.
Excellent. Well, I think, from the point of view of education and service providers addressing that vertical market, there's a lot to be looked at here in terms of having a platform that can be skinned to your look and feel and your branding, make it feel like your experience, pull through all of that capacity in your data center, get your utilization up, and hopefully help your customers deliver the enablement they need to their customers. Equally, for a service provider to use VLP to do training to customers, because I know there's a lot of service providers exposing VCD, self-service, cloud direct availability, and there's always sort of questions about how these products can be used and what services, other services they provide as well could be easily packaged up in VLP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much, Brandon. Really appreciate your time today, walking us through that. And now everyone knows how to schedule time in your diary. Hopefully you'll get calendar. We'll get someone to fill up your calendar for you. All right. Brilliant. Joerg, thank you again for sorting this one out. And Brandon, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you so much.
Bye.